because I want to get to that comparison between Boston and the Sixers. You mentioned sort of the potentially rough patch that they could have through the playoffs. Right now, it would be that 5-4 matchup in the first round, right? And here's the irony about that. Boston is actually heavily favored in that kind of matchup, right? I mean, they almost swept Philly out of the Eastern Conference semifinals last year after going 3-0. So that hypothetical first-round matchup could actually be good for Boston. It could be bad for the Sixers, and this is where we'll get back on track, and I'll tell you that basically over the weekend, Jackie McMullen, our teammate, was out at the Sloan Conference, and she spoke to Sixers co-owner Josh Harris. And he said that it would be, quote, problematic, very problematic. It would not be what we're playing for if we got swept or not swept, but if they lost in that first round kind of matchup. He said, I'd be unhappy, we'd be unhappy, the city would be unhappy. We're going to work hard to make sure that doesn't happen. So given that whole martini glass of uncertainty, Byron, that the Celtics have, and that right now, at least, with less than 6 weeks to go, that could be the first round matchup. Right. Are you a little worried about the Sixers too there?
Yeah, I am. I'm a little worried. But if this matchup happens, currently the way that the Celtics are playing, I'm taking Philly.
You are?
I'm taking Philly because I think they're in a better place. And, you know, with the addition of Tobias Harris and then you got Jimmy Butler earlier, you know, they have the type of pieces that can definitely match up much better with the Boston Celtics than they did, you know, 3 or 4 months ago. So at this particular time, with the way Boston is just kind of flailing on both ends of the floor, and the way Philly's kind of playing, with a be healthy, I think Philly's the better team.
First off, I want to applaud Josh Harris for doing this interview. I really respect when owners come out and make statements. And by the way, of course he'd be disappointed. They've made 2 major trades to commit to this season. Elton Brand told Woj on his podcast, I'm going for the title this year. It's not so much Boston in the first round or Philly in the first round, vice versa. It's that if you're Philly or Boston, you have to beat each other. Right. Then you possibly have to beat Toronto. Then you possibly have to beat Milwaukee. It's more the path than the initial. You know, a couple years ago, I think it was 2015, the Spurs played the Clippers in the first round. It was a brutal 7-game series. Either of those teams could have maybe won the conference. But the way everything fell, they played in the first round. And I remember Doc and Pop complaining about it during the whole series. Why do we have to? Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it's a result of it, and it doesn't mean that either team is lesser. If that series happened in the conference finals, we wouldn't say if one tossed well, they got to rebuild the whole thing. But it's important to point out, for the Sixers especially, they potentially have 2 max-level free agents in Tobias Harris and Jimmy Butler. And before you commit $300 million, which is what those 2 guys would cost, you'd like to know that at least can win a playoff series. And that's why the chips are all down for this.
And really not just down for once you get to the playoffs, but down for the rest of the regular season. There are less than 6 weeks until the playoffs. This is it. This is the time you put the pedal down and decide where your seeding is going to be, who you're going to face in which round. Are you, quote, a disappointment, as Josh Harris was saying this would be, or can you move through? This is a big deal. I know sometimes in the NBA we feel like, oh, the end of March, it gets a little dead. Everyone's just waiting for the playoffs. There's a lot in play right now.
I will point out the Pacers who are causing all this with their good play, their March schedule is brutal.
Yes.
I think it's more likely than anything that the Pacers will slide back, and we won't have that. But that said, it hasn't happened to this point.